Thank you so much, Jessica. Thank you, everyone, for having me today and giving me the opportunity to talk about my story and my path through making games for the last 27 years, and also hopefully help you get a more uh, articulate map of what it looks like to enter the industry for those of you who wish to or have aspirations to. It is, in general, I'll say it is one of the most exciting industries to work in. It has had the most growth of the entertainment sector over the last 20, 30 something years, especially when mobile came on the scene, when mobile gaming came on. We've seen 30% growth year over year of the games market. And to give a general sense of the size of the games market, to get you even more excited to join the industry, games in total pulls in more revenue every year than movies, books, and music combined, times some number. So it is a massive source of entertainment for humans on this planet. So welcome to the industry for those of you who will be joining, and hopefully I can get you even more excited and give you some more information. So yeah, my name's Steve. I'll share with you in a second when I share the screen specifically what my journey has been like, where I've been, what I've done in that time. And then I plan on switching over and showing you a rough graphic I've made that shows the entry points through technology, business, and creative, and all of the different sub branches where you can enter in the industry and how they come together as you advance your career and what it's like to go through that journey as I've done. So that's what I'll be sharing with you. And then after that, if you can hold your questions until I'm done showing those graphics, then please do add questions once I open up the floor in chat, because I don't know if I can see everyone in the gallery view. So if you could please add questions in chat, add your name if you wish as well. So if you'd like to be personally addressed, and I will do my best to get through those in sequence with the time that remains thereafter. I'll do my best to get through what I'm going to say so I leave time for y'all to ask me questions. Happy to answer them. So I'll go ahead and share screen now. Jessica, can you confirm if you see something?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay,
You're
great.
all good on this end.
Awesome. I will tell you my story in games. It is it's unorthodox. When I started in games in 1995, there were no schools with curriculum for gaming. It was almost impossible to get in. So many of my contemporaries, people my age, got into games through back channels, people they know. And in my case, I crashed a Christmas party. And that's a true story. I crashed a Christmas party. I found out who ran the place, went up and introduced myself. And miraculously, 2 weeks later, I was working there after just working at the mall selling games at a store called Electronics Boutique. And I wanted to be a game artist. I was an okay artist, but I worked really hard and I aspired to work in the industry, and it was my dream. I did know how to 3D model, which was rare at the time, from a teacher I knew in school who had got me some software through a connection. So based on that, I was able to get an entry level position as an artist at a company called Looking Glass. Looking Glass is an old company. I don't expect anyone here to have heard of them. We closed in 2000. Our most famous game was called Thief, and Thief was the first of what they call stealth games, which means you had to be quiet and AI could hear you or see you, and you could hide. It's a very popular series. It was one of our biggest money makers. I worked on the flight simulator side, so I made flight simulators for 5 years. Not quite as exciting, but it was there that I grew my skills as an artist. I was the lead 3D artist by the time our first title was done, and I moved from art to design, which is very used to be very strange shift. I went from making 3D models to designing AI fighter combat systems. So I'm an odd duck in that way, and that's how my story goes. I just jumped around. I was just wanted to learn new things, and I'll say this: out of all the skills that any of you have that you might think is important or not for any job, but especially in the games industry, incessant curiosity about how things work is probably the most valuable one in my experience. And that's how I got where I am. I just want to know how things work and know enough of it to be able to speak meaningfully to it, to all the people across my teams who are specialists in those areas, because the ability to speak the lingo for each area of game design allows you to become a lead and a director because you can speak meaningfully and see how it all comes together. So curiosity is a really great attribute if you feel this burning need to find out more all the time, whether you're getting paid or not. This is what drives indie game developers who don't necessarily make a lot of money, but they just have this passion to make experiences, to learn more about making these experiences. So curiosity, if you have that spark in your eye, good for you. You're very lucky, and do your best to feed that curiosity, no matter what. And then I moved from Looking Glass to a company called Harmonix. Harmonix ended up making Guitar Hero. I was there 3 years before Guitar Hero, working on a game called Frequency, which was ended up becoming Guitar Hero a couple versions later. And I went back to art there because I just missed making art. When you work in design, sometimes, especially in the older days, you're in spreadsheets, you're writing documents. Not nearly as satisfying as making a change to something and seeing it in the game a minute later. So I really missed art. Went back to art there. Then I moved to a company called Oddworld when I came out to California. I was originally from Boston. I moved to California. I didn't know anybody out there. It was hard getting back in the industry. And at Oddworld, I jumped into level design, which was a whole new branch of game design. Game design and tech, and I'll talk about this in a minute. Think of it as a tree, and there's lots of branches that are specializations within the family of game design. Level design was my favorite, because you get to build the experience. Literally, it's where the rubber hits the road. It's where code and art and sound and gameplay all come together in the player's hands. So I was really hooked on level design. From there, I moved to up to Seattle for the first time, where I am now. Um, and I worked at a company called Valve. I worked on a series called Half-Life 2. I worked on levels for Episode 2, and also helped convert Half-Life 2 from PC to Xbox, which was really interesting. I won't go into some of the technical challenges there, but it's kind of like taking 100 gallons of water and trying to squeeze it into a 1 gallon jug, because there's far less resources on the console than there were on the PC at the time. Because the first Xbox was not like the Xbox now; it wasn't as powerful. From Valve, I went to Electronic Arts. I spent 7 years total at Electronic Arts. Um, and Electronic Arts, I went from level design to lead design to creative director. I really sort of like got to experience what it's like moving up the ladder, as it were, not for the sake of doing so, but because, again, I was very curious and articulate. Verbal skills are very well rewarded in the games industry, because there's a lot of unknowns and there's a lot of fear and ambiguity as you're starting a project. And if you can help people understand with great clarity what it is we're trying to do together before you've done it, you can actually help people feel more comfortable what we're all trying to do, and sort of like calm everyone down and keep people calm through that ambiguity until you have something on screen, and then you can all say, ah, I get it. So if you have verbal skills, you're very articulate, you like to help people understand because you're worried about them feeling scared about what they're doing, you might have a career path that would head towards project management or people management or director. Because it is, I underestimated it for many years. I was lucky enough to be fairly articulate, but if you have verbal communication skills and wish to continue to develop those skills, you have a chance of having a really great career in games, no matter which of the avenues you come into games through. Then from Electronic Arts, I went to Zynga. Zynga, we made they still do like mobile, primarily web games at that point, like Farmville, Cityville, although anything ends with a Ville, that's what Zynga made. Very popular with the millennial generation and with Gen X. Not as big of a brand as it used to be, but at the time they're really something. And so I went there to learn about the business of running live games, which is very important these days. Most games are live games. You tend not to buy as many games where you buy it, you play it, and you're done. There's still games like that, but more and more games are live games these days. And there I became sort of a master prototyper because I had taught myself how to code over 20 years. I was an artist. I had done written dialogue for games. I'd voice acted in one of the games. I had literally done everything because of my curiosity. And that allowed me to become a good prototyper. I could throw together a game within a week or two, to play it well enough and say, yeah, this is kind of something. There might be something here. It's kind of like digging for gold when you're making games. You try things out, and real fast, you want to see if you found something, some trace amount of goodness. And that's what prototypers do. And it's a very specific skill set that has become more valuable. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. From there, I went to Amazon, where I became a design director, moved back up to director, spent about 4 years there. Moved on to a company called Probably Monsters, which most of you haven't heard of because they still haven't released a game, as a director for 2 years. And finally, I was recruited by Supercell. It was a 6-month interview process. That was something, because I really wanted to be sure, because they're looking for founders to start new North American studios. And so I am the game lead and founder of one of the two North American based studios, has joined Supercell, and I've been there for about a year and a month now. So I'm still fairly new at Supercell, and maybe like some of you, I've been a fan of their games for years, and I'm very humbled but proud to join their ranks. So that's my story in a nutshell. This, of course, is so much more detailed than that, but we probably don't have time for all of it. Happy to answer questions about that too. So the next bit I wanted to share before we open up for questions is just a general sort of like visual presentation of the games business and career paths therein as I see it from my experience from 27 years of doing it. So really games are the product or at the intersection of technology, business, and creative. Those are the three main buckets of careers and mindsets and disciplines that come together to make game happen. And as you look at each one, they have like multiple I talked about the tree for design. There's lots of different branches. It's the same with technology. So you can say you're an engineer, and primarily engineer is the noun here. So if you want to be or programmer or coder or even hacker, if you're dealing with code, if you're talking to the machine through code, this is the magic that brings games to life. Art is just art on the page and doesn't move until code brings it to life. So code has tremendous amounts of power. It's where the wizards live and where the magic happens. So if you become an engineer, you have the power to breathe life into people's art and creativity and bring it to life. It's amazing. But it's also very hard for those who may, like myself, not super great at math, but it's more about logic than math, depending upon where you come into engineering. But if you are already coding where you are at your age, good for you. That gives you a huge leg up. But getting the discipline of a CS degree will allow you to more easily secure a job. And you're going to come in one of these areas of specialization, most likely. In this, just for context, I'm talking about joining a larger organization like Electronic Arts. Larger organizations, their business is built on specialization. Smaller teams, like I run a team with, there's 5 of us making the prototype. You want to have a lot of different skills, so more generalists, the specialization and generalization. Early on in small teams, people wear more hats. So I'm an engineer and an artist and a voice actor, and I do sound design. But as the team grows, as the organization grows, you'll start specializing. So for a large organization, what I'm about to say is mainly true. Smaller organizations, mileage may vary. It depends on what the team needs. But in a large organization, if you have a CS degree, you could enter in as a rendering engineer. They are really the wizards. They're talking to the machine directly and making magic happen on screen. Gameplay engineers are also the best ones, are also design minded. They have strong opinions about gameplay and game design, and they form a very strong bond with game designers. In the better games, every time you see a game that you play a game that's miraculously fun, I guarantee their gameplay engineers had a very close relationship with game designers, and they were inseparable, had lunch every day, spent many hours talking about gameplay. Server engineers, they're not as close to like what happens when you press a button, but they're responsible for making online multiplayer work, and God bless them, because that is hard to do. They also handle security, make sure people aren't hacking in and making your night miserable on your favorite game online because somebody hacked in. And hacking is a real problem. And then lastly, tools engineers. Most people don't want to work on tools. If you are a younger engineer entering the industry for the first time, you actually might be put on the tools because most engineers don't want to do it. But if you love doing tools, you have a career and you're locked in because nobody really wants to do it. And this is, when I say tools, these are tools that the team uses to make it more easy to make the game. And you're making everyone's lives better, and everyone will love you and buy you lots of free lunches and coffees because you made their job easier, basically. But not a lot of engineers want to do it. In business, business is where you find finance, project management, people management, marketing. You could say that like technology is how we make the thing. Business is when we make the thing for, and who we make it for, and who's making the game. And creative is why are we making what. So each one of these disciplines own who, when, what, why. It's creative sort of points to the destination creatively and says we want to make a game about sailing because sailing makes you feel free and happy, and all the sort of soft skill stuff. Business is like, is there a market for that? Who are we going to need to make that? When should we have it done by to hit market? Technology is like, how would we even build that? So all these different disciplines come together along those lines as well. So to get into business, this is the wrong color. 1 second. There we go. To get into business, there's a bunch of avenues academically, any business degree, MBAs. There's a lot of MBAs in the industry that run live services. Data analysis is a really strong axis if you are interested in looking at reams of data to figure out, like a detective, what's going on out there and come up with a story about why the numbers dropped. Oh, it's because of this and that and the other thing. You will be invaluable to a live service team. So data analysis, I didn't add it, but it's definitely part of business. And then lastly, creative, which is the fun one. This is where I live and where I came from. This is where you find art, design, writing, and sound. Now, even though I'm separating out these specializations, I want to be really clear that it is absolutely the case that everyone watching here can do and might end up doing all three of these things in their life. People who are engineers, rendering engineers, or gameplay engineers, or server engineers, they are also creative people. It's just not, that's not their specialization, that's not their job. But there are opportunities to start doing different combinations of these things depending upon where you work. Like I was saying, gameplay engineers can also be game designers. Artists can also be engineers, and they become technical artists. Artists can also become good at managing and leading people. They become leads and they start getting closer to business. So as you advance in your career away from these specializations and the branches and you head towards sort of like the root of things, a lead or a senior is somebody who begins to do more than just their specialization. They are at the intersection of at least two things. So a lead tech artist is somebody who is living between art and technology. A senior technical designer, or especially a lead designer, has to understand how technology makes designs possible and what designs are asking of technology. To make this feature possible, we're going to need this technology. They have to work with the engineering team, and so on and so on. And so art, design, writing, and sound live in creative. As you move up in your career, and not everyone has to, you can remain a principal, which means you don't want to have people you manage. You don't have maybe leadership desires or any aspirations to be a manager. You become a senior, then a principal. But if you want to manage people and also have a lot of creative control, you'd move to a leadership position. And lastly, to become a director, as I've been a couple of times, more than a couple now, I'm getting old. A director has to see everything all together holistically and how everything comes in. And that's where most of the compromises are. You can't get what you want all the time. Everything costs something, and there's trade-offs continually. It's a constant negotiation with yourself and with everyone else on the team about how to put this together. If only it was easy as saying, I have a cool game idea about a donkey with a rocket pack that flies through space. That's day one. Day two is like, how are we going to do that? We can't do everything. We're going to have to sacrifice some of these features. When is this supposed to ship? Like, it's a very huge Rubik's Cube puzzle to try to solve. And you're hands off at that point, and you're mostly using words, and you're planning and you're negotiating, and it's a lot of work. It's a different kind of work. But up here, you have to see how it all comes together. You can't just favor creative. You can't just think about business. You have to think about all of them all the time together. So that's all I have to say about, in general, what it's like to work in a larger studio. Smaller studios don't necessarily look like this. Everyone has to do a little bit of everything, and they tend to be generalists. But with that all being said, let's open it up for questions, and feel free to add your questions to the chat. I think that's the best way to do it, but we could also try having people raise their hands. I just don't know if I can see everyone's hands in Zoom. They have a little hand icon thing you can press. So maybe
Yeah,
let's.
I was gonna say I can monitor that too and see if
Okay.
um okay.
No questions. I'd be interested in hearing what some of the games are that folks like playing and what platform they like to play on. because I see a lot of folks moving to mobile, and then now a lot of people doing cross-platform. All right, Braden, what has been my favorite job throughout my career? That's a great question. Um, Out of all the places I've worked, I think my favorite job was probably at Oddworld, because I mean I was working I was working 16 to 18-hour days for 2 years, including on weekends sometimes. It was very hard, but I got to build 11 of the 33 levels. I got to write half the dialogue. I record, and I got to do one of the voices for the characters. So on any given day, I'm like creating a level that the player plays through. I'm coding up some behavior for the AI. I'm writing some dialogue, then running down the hall and recording it, coming back to my desk and putting it in the game, and it's actually going to ship that way. The amount of creative input I had in that game was phenomenal, and I really enjoyed that for sure. That was probably overall my favorite. I had the most fun. It was crazy and stressful, but it was really fun. Next question from Jennifer: what is the most popular game at Supercell? I'm assuming you mean popular with our players versus like what we like the best. Um, that's really hard. I guess I'd have to say, just based upon numbers, Clash of Clans is our premier product over the last 10 years. But Heyday has probably the most religious, the most loyal fans. Yes, Jessica, you're a big fan. We like the numbers for Heyday are not nearly as high as Supercell as far as like number of users, but the same users have been playing for like over 10 years straight. So very loyal following. But Clash of Clans,
Heyday is addicting.
it really is. Yes. Let's see. Calvin, thanks, by the way, folks, for throwing out questions. Calvin asks, what would you say is the most difficult part of game development? Oh, yes. Um, Making sure you choose the right constraints. So what I mean by constraints is um, if you were to tell a team you can make anything you want, you have as much money as you want, you can take as long as you want to do it, that team will fail. You have to say, you have to install constraints yourself sometimes. Be like, we can't let ourselves do whatever we want. We have to pick a target. We have to pick a genre. We have to pick a date we want to deliver it by. You actually have to intentionally uh, box yourself in to then be innovative. You have to have some pressure. You have to have the right amount of pressure you put on yourself, or the organization will do it for you. That can be really difficult to navigate, and picking the right constraints. Um, what is the best way to make connections to the industry to get your foot in the door, besides crashing Christmas parties? Luckily, you don't have to do that anymore. I mean, you can try it if you want. Best way to make connections, honestly, so much of the top talent I see is making games before they're paid to make games. We live in the golden age of middleware. Any of you can get Unity, any of you can get Unreal. And if you want to make games, cool, start making games and put your money where your mouth is, quite honestly. Go make games, experiment, mess up a bunch, get discouraged, get encouraged, just jump in and find online development communities for game jams and indie developers. Indie developers are such great mentors. Their passion is intense. These are people who are using their own time and own money to make the thing they love. They will talk your ear off about games and help you out and get you on the right foot and give you advice. So I would seek out game jams and online communities of people who actually make games. Lots of people want to make games. Out of every 100 people who say they want to make a game, maybe one actually makes a game. It's a big leap from talking about it and dreaming about it to going and just doing it. There's nothing more powerful than just doing it. Even if you don't go to school, it's possible still in this industry to get a job without having any degree. I did not go to college. I just worked a lot and I was super curious. And I would sleep under my desk. I worked too much when I was young. It was unhealthy. But if you don't go to college, you can still get in the industry if you start making games. And if the games are interesting, they show that you have the passion. It proves that you have the drive, whether the game's fun or not. So if you want to do it, then do it. And if you do it enough, eventually someone might pay you to do it. And you'll learn some more formal techniques and skills. Best way to get in is to meet people in game jams and to start making games, even if it's just like a little character jumping over boxes. Just start doing it. What characters did you voice on what games? I voiced on in Oddworld, Stranger's Wrath. I voiced the minions. I voiced many characters during development that later we hire proper professional voice actors to do that. But I have a voice that always, no matter what company I work at, they're like, "Hey, you want to do a voice? Because we need to have voices, and you have an interesting voice." So I've been on many characters, but only in one shipping product did I officially play one of the characters. How do I get my ideas? All right, that is a wonderful question because I have not made the game I want to make for most of my career. I make a game that needs to get made because a business needs to make it, or I elevate someone else's idea on the team. I've learned as a lead and as a director, I'm there to facilitate and make people as good as they can be, and I'm more than happy to celebrate their ideas and elevate them and help them make them better. So I see myself as like a processor and refiner of other people's ideas to make them better. I don't get much joy out of it being my idea in particular. Thereafter, ideas do occur to you as you start making the game. And that's where the real true innovations lie after you start making something. Like you can make a Candy Crush knockoff and still have a really innovative Candy Crush knockoff, even though the idea in the beginning is just to make another candy based match 3 game. So when I do have ideas, I'm skirting your answer or your question, but when I do have ideas, they come from the world around me. They come from your experiences. Your brain can't actually make something up in a void. It's going to be based on your experiences, the things you've read, the things you've seen, the people you know, the places you've been. Go get life experience to make more interesting games. And this is why diversity is so incredibly important for our industry. We have been primarily playing games made by people who are like me from places I am and what I look like in my life experience based upon race, gender, socioeconomic standing. We need to have more games made by more people around the world because they will bring their unique life experiences into a new kind of game no one's played before. So go experience life. That's your first homework if you want to make great games. Get out of the house if you can. Some of us spent way too much time in the basement playing games in the 80s and 90s. Let's see. Do you plan on staying with Supercell for the rest of your career? I do. I'm I'm old, I'm getting old. I'm gonna be 51 in about a month. And by the way, when you get older, you don't feel older. You still think you're like 26, but your body tells you differently. So I still feel like I'm a kid and I'm just starting. Very childlike spirit. But in truth, I probably have maybe 10 years left of me in the industry. And I would like to finish things out at Supercell, making games that generations of people play together and for 100 years. That's the dream. A game that really helps people enjoy their time here on this planet. Let's see. How many of the games you have helped create do you play? That is a great question. The answer is none of them. I love the people I make the games with more than the games themselves. I do love the games. I'm proud of the games we make, but I got to tell you, after 2, 3, sometimes 4 years making something, you're a little tired of playing it because you do have to play it all day, every day for years. And as much as I love pizza, using food as an analogy, imagine having pizza every day, all day for 4 years and nothing else. You don't want pizza for a while. I'll go back eventually after a couple of years and play the game, but yeah, not really. Not me anyway. When is the next Supercell game coming out? I cannot say. That is private information. But when it does come out, I think you'll like it, and please do try it. I hope you do like it. How would you suggest getting started in the world building aspect of game design? Ah, yes, world building. That's where I love. That's where I come from. Um, I would honestly just go into Blender or Unreal and just start playing with shapes and playing with art tech. If you think spatially, like I do, you think about volumes of space and how they facilitate whatever activity. Like if you think about, I have a sport and like Quidditch. How do you design an arena for the play of Quidditch to take on certain physical attributes? Start making spaces to explore or whatever activity. Pick verbs, then build a space that best surfaces the value of that verbs. And it can be simple shapes, or you can also kind of like start noodling around with some art tech and shaders. But world building is about the story of the world primarily. What is happening here? And if somebody jumps in the world and they get what happened here, what's the history of this place just by being in it, or they get the context by being in it, that's the best kind of world building is story based. But those are the things you can do to start practicing the skills. Just get an editor, start building shapes that are supposed to go with like a verb in your head. And if you really want to like become an indie developer, also learn some coding or blueprinting in Unreal. Blueprint is their sort of visual game development tool that they give you, and actually make the verb to make the space and then make the space better for the verb and so on. And that back and forth is where gameplay really comes from. But that's what I do for world building. It starts with a story and a premise and a context. Let's see. Let's see my track of my space here. What do you know about Tencent? Well, I know I don't know much more about Tencent than anybody in the public domain knows about Tencent. Um, Supercell is partially owned by Tencent. Tencent For those of you who don't know, Tencent is a Chinese interest, Chinese company that has invested very deeply and very broadly in entertainment, both in China and around the world. Many new American startups, many are invested. Tencent is an investor of that company, so Supercell is one of them. Uh, can't talk about private operations with Tencent, but I will say they are a treasure trove um, of data from live services, which these days with game design, you kind of have to be part data scientist to know what's going on because most games are live service games now. It is a fantastic, like I worked for Amazon for 4 years and I thought that was a real marvel of organizational science. Tencent is even larger than that. It is one of the world's largest and most capable companies and has a lot of interest in entertainment. And the second part of that question, let's see, what was your favorite game to design and why? Well, I had in part Oddworld, the Oddworld game I worked on, Stranger's Wrath, was a lot of fun to design. But I think Frequency, which ended up becoming Guitar Hero, was a lot of fun because we didn't know what we were doing. And I had a very Forrest Gump like experience. Now that I think back, at the time it was not a big deal, but looking back, I'm like, oh wow, I was in the room where it happened. To quote Hamilton, I was at a whiteboard with Alex, the owner of Harmonix, and the lead designer Ryan, or lead artist Ryan, and we on the whiteboard we drew out the track with the gems that you catch in time with the music that became Guitar Hero. So that's my favorite moment because at the time, I swear to you, we're like, oh, that's kind of stupid. I don't know if that's going to work. Let's get some coffee. But it ends up becoming Guitar Hero someday, which became Rock Band. Like started this massive phenomenon. And just to know I was one of the three people in the room going, I don't know, maybe we should try it. And then working on the first version of what became that. So I like the story of that, I should say. That's a lot of fun. Let's see. What's the easiest game genre to develop as a starting point? Side scrollers. Uh, it focuses like I tell you, removing that third dimension, having a 2D game or a top-down game, but removing the third dimension actually translates into you having to worry about less math, quite honestly, and also saves you from a lot of bugs. That third dimension comes with a lot of work and responsibility and issues. So I would go with a side scroller like Super Mario style, 2D, just focus on jumping and mechanics and metrics and building a world that works with those mechanics, because the world and the mechanics have to work together, of course, to create the emotion. Your job as a game developer is to create emotions in people, induce emotions. However you do that, and one of the ways to do that is to create tension in the gameplay. The tension in the gameplay exists between the mechanic and the world. So imagine, for instance, a concrete example. I worked in a game called Dante's Inferno. I was the lead designer. It was like a God of War game. There's a lot of platforming, even though it's 3D. And you imagine if you're playing a game where you have to jump and grab a ledge and you barely grab that ledge and you pull yourself up, there's a lot of drama in that story because you almost didn't make it, versus jumping clearly and landing safely on the other side, a little less dramatic. That's what I mean by tension exists between the mechanic and the world. I'd say side scroller is probably the best place to start. And you can go onto Steam and you'll see what I'm talking about. There's so many side scrollers. Let's see. Good game idea. Mad Minivan Mama. I don't, Jennifer, I don't know what's entailed in that game, but sometimes you hear a title and you're like, from an indie perspective, that gets my attention. That's half the problem. Is half the trouble is to get attention, and a name goes a long way. So Mad Minivan Mama. I'm probably gonna be thinking today about what that would be. Let's see. You should go make that. Please make that. I want to see that on Steam Humble Bundle by next year. That's your homework. What's my favorite game? My favorite game is Sea of Thieves. I played 2,000 hours of it through COVID with my old Amazon team, and the fact that it allowed us to get together and still play as a team and stay together through COVID was really powerful for us emotionally. It's just a fantastic game. Sea of Thieves, you can play on Xbox and Steam. It's a pirate game, but you have to work together as a team to do well. That's what I like about it. Do I prefer Xbox or PlayStation? Honestly, I'm a PC gamer. I have all the consoles. I have bought every console since the Magnavox Odyssey in 1978, and I mean everyone: 3DO, Saturn, all of them. But I do so primarily just for research now. I really do prefer mouse and keyboard. I can't help it. I'm from the original Quake generation of player. I need to have more accuracy of my inputs, and game controllers are cool, just never as accurate as mouse and keyboard. That's all. Let's see. What is your design process for creating games? What is the time frame? How long from idea to public? Awesome questions. Design process for creating games. two ways to approach it. From inside you, I have an idea that I love, which can lead to a lot of passion, a lot of goodness. But if it's not responding to real market demand, it's less likely to be successful. The indie space is like this. Indie games are games made by people that wanted to make that game really bad, and they don't care if anyone likes it. They just hope somebody likes it so they can make another one and make some money. Most games from companies like Electronic Arts, it's a business analysis process that starts it. The game I worked on, Dante's Inferno, for instance, I didn't want to make a God of War game, but as a professional game developer, I was able to make one that got good ratings for its mechanics, I should say. But my boss's boss said we need this kind of game by this time. Put a plan together. It's very business oriented. That's not fun. That's not a warm, happy story, but that's actually how larger companies work. They're like, we need a game in this genre by this time. And you're like, okay, I got it. I'll go make one. So that's where the ideas can come from sometimes as a business, a market demand or market opportunity, you know. But in the case of my team right now, it's absolutely coming from inside of us because Supercell makes games that it loves as well as games that its customers love. That process is put a prototype together based upon your dream or your thesis, the thing you think might work. Hurry up and make the prototype, then get it in players' hands early to test to see if people who aren't you actually like it. It's important to do that soon because you can really be delusional about your own idea for a long time. And everyone's like, why would I play a game about a character made of sticks in a fire world? But what is that? Like, you have to hurry up and prove your idea in a prototype if it's coming from you. If it's a business idea, uh, you can go a long way through development based upon the belief that we've identified the business opportunity and it's a little more calculating and clinical. So it can come from different places, quite honestly. That was a very long answer. What is the time frame? It depends. I've I'll use Dante's Inferno again. We made that in 18 months. We were originally told we had 48 months, and then after we got greenlit, they said actually you have to make it in 18. It has to be all the same stuff. So it can be high pressure sometimes. Some games though take 6 years. It really depends. Supercell has worked on games for 8 years and then killed the game themselves and never had it go public. We're very picky. We kill a lot of our own games, even though we love them, and that's the discipline that is hard to find in the industry. Is sometimes, yeah, they say you have to basically cancel or kill your own darlings, things that you're so passionate about. I've worked almost a decade on this, but I can't deny it's not working. You have to take it out and get rid of it and then start something new. That's a heartbreaking experience. Sometimes people have to take a couple months off to recover from it. But time frame is really, it's all over the place, quite honestly. How long from idea to public? Also, kind of all over the place. Depends what you're making. Making an MMO, it will be 5 years before it's ready, at least. If you're making a side scroller, maybe 2 years. Depends on how much polish you want to put on it. And these days, you release a game early. Some people do, called early access. I don't know if y'all played early access games. You release it kind of early and ugly. You get an early fan base that has patience with you because they believe in the idea too. Then you can get it to public pretty early, maybe after a year or two. How small can game companies get? Well, I started a studio with a friend after Amazon. There's two of us. I have released mobile apps by myself, so you can have a company of one. But successful companies tend to have the more people we have with the more diverse skill sets and the bigger the vision, the better the product, the better the marketing. Yeah, you still want to have like 20 to 30 people. I'd say successful game companies can be 20 to 30 people. All that being said, Minecraft was created by one person named Notch. And for many years, Notch ran his organization with himself and maybe two or three friends, and then sold it for $2.2 billion to Microsoft. And now hundreds of people work on that. So surprisingly few people can make a huge success. It can happen. It's just less likely. What games do you like to play? I like to play strategy games. I like to play a couple action games like Sea of Thieves. I like CGIs. Oh, sorry, card collection games. So CCGs. I like playing like Hearthstone, Slay the Spire, things like that in my free time. I play a lot less games now than I used to. I spend a lot of time in front of a screen. I try to get away from the computer as much as I can these days. How do you create the lore? Honestly, I am not the person, Jennifer, that tends to create the lore. That is, I'm not on like the world building writing side of the creative space. I come from the art and design side. I do love a good story, but I would never claim to be a good storyteller. I just know it needs to be authentic and you need to believe it to be immersed. But I leave that to other very skilled peers that I've had over the years. What is the most recent game you designed? Well, a prototype that we made last spring that I shut down because it wasn't going anywhere. Technically, the last game I designed that was released was one of my really simple mobile games I made one summer. I gave myself a test. I'm like, I'm going to make 6 games in a month and release them all on mobile. So I got like a week, less than a week to make each one. So technically that, but nobody cares about that. The last game I designed that made millions of dollars was actually Dante's Inferno in 2009. Since then, I've been going to companies trying to help teams that are in trouble and trying to turn them around. That's not what Supercell is. This is the first time I've actually made a new team. But I've gone from like Amazon to Probably Monsters, trying to help teams that were struggling, which is really hard to do. But I feel bad for people who are in a bad place. It's sort of my thing. So last time a game that anybody cared about that made millions and millions of dollars that I designed was Dante's Inferno for Xbox and PlayStation 2009. Let's see. Guitar Hero, Rock Band, and Farmville are my favorite games. Yes, excellent. I did for the record, I did not work on Farmville. I worked on Chefville when I was at Zynga. I did the sound design, but I mostly built new IP and prototyped them. What was the very first video game I played? Oh, well, people my age, it's just gonna be Pong. I gotta show what Pong is. It was on the Magnavox Odyssey. It was the first game anyone could play on their TV at home. Was basically like you can control a line up and down, and the other player was another line up and down, and a little square was the ball, and it was like badminton or tennis. I'm like, give me a break. So we had to really imagine, but it was the first time. I don't know, you can't imagine this because our world's so interactive now, but imagine growing up and TV just showed you things, and for the first time you could tell the TV what to show on the screen. You could control the TV. It was amazing. I loved it. So it was Pong, which is about as old school as you get. Okay, how do you balance a game for all difficulties? Oh, Sean. That is the hardest, I swear. Towards the end of production, because games have like ideation, prototyping, pre-production, production, then live service. These are the phases of game. When you reach production, that's when the tuning really starts. It takes teams. Like we have, like Clash of Clans probably has like 6 or 7 people tuning that game still all these years later because they have to see what's going on. It's a very complex machine. You have to make some changes, then observe what happens with millions and millions of players playing and see what the trends are doing, and then come back and make another little adjustment. Endless, thankful job tuning games. The answer, how do you balance? Well, you have tools to balance, but then there's philosophy. And then, like, as if you're a designer or someone tuning the game, you're in charge of how the game feels, and that's why it's hard. Like the game creates feelings, creates emotions. You're turning numbers into emotions. What kind of, it's like witchcraft. It's really hard to know how reducing a value by 0.1 is going to make people happier. It's a really hard job, and you have to stop thinking about what you think would be good. And you have to start paying attention to how people are reacting. It's very important that you have this empathy for players, and the people who do this work are bless them. They're like, it's a thankless job sometimes. It's constant, never ending. But that's how you balance a game. There's also like, what kind of game is it? There's a bunch of templates and stuff you can use, but let's see. For all difficulties too, by the way, the couple solutions there. God of War series in the 2000s had this one mechanic where if you died 5 times in a row, they're like, you sure you don't want me to change the difficulty setting for you? And basically the difficulty tends to be a value somewhere under in the code. There's like a number, and if it's 10 and the game's too hard, the game will turn it down to an 8. The game will turn it down to a 4. It's kind of like that. It's like turning down the volume, really. There's a series of numbers that the values get turned down if you design it correctly. Do your kids play any of the games you have created? That's yes, Jessica, that's a really heartwarming question. Thank you. The first iPhone and iPad app I made for my daughter when she was born. So by the time she was 2, she was playing it, and a lot of my friends and a few tens of thousands of other kids were playing it too with no marketing. I was really proud of that. So yeah, she did play that technically. Otherwise, she doesn't. Some of the games I made early in my career, there were fight sims, but then there were also kind of some really gory games that I wouldn't like her to play. But even when she got old enough to play them, she doesn't prefer those kinds of games. She prefers like Sim City. I got an offer to be creative director in Sim City at one point that I turned down But she likes those kinds of games. That was as close as I probably got to maybe working on something that she truly enjoys. But no, she doesn't really like the kinds of games I have made. But let's see. Hopefully, she'll like this one I'm making now. We'll see. What was the very first game you designed? I was a kid, and it was a mod of a board game that I played called Axis and Allies. That was the first time I did anything design related. I created a new mechanic, and then we prototyped it and tried it with the board game. That's technically game design. It was a rules modification. That's a boring answer, but the very first video game I designed was a game called Mock, which was like Mad Max in the sky. It was when I made flight sims, and it was really complicated. We almost got it pitched and greenlit, but in the end of the day, the publisher changed their mind. And I was 22. It's a good thing it didn't get greenlit because I had no idea what I was doing. Quite honestly, it would have been a disaster. What are some of the reasons games are killed? Very good business question, and one of the hardest things you can do. The simplest answer these days, because we have live service games, is you build something, you set up tests with a limited audience, and then you measure for any KPI. KPI stands for key performance indicator. And there's a bunch of different KPIs, but early on, you're looking for retention, which means you make a game, people install it on day one. How many of those people, out of 100 of those people that installed on day one, how many people on their own accord came back and played on day two? And if 3 people came back out of 100, that's 3% retention. That is not good. So you're looking for at least 30 of those people to come back, and that's a good sign. And your job as a game designer thereafter is to figure out how to turn 30 into 31, into 40, into 60. And it gets unrealistic any higher than that. So retention is a key indicator that things are going poorly. And for Supercell's part, most of the games that we've killed were ones that we couldn't improve retention in our early release tests. And if you can't get people coming back, it's the name of the game. If you can't get people to come back and play again, you don't have a business. So, it's kind of like no different than opening a sandwich shop, and you open on day one and 100 people show up to buy a sandwich and only 3 people come back the next day to buy a sandwich. Like, oh, I guess my sandwiches aren't very good. So that's kind of how we decide to kill things. There's other reasons too that are more nuanced and complicated. Like sometimes teams don't get along. It's a bad social dynamic, whatever. A key person quits. There's all kinds of reasons, but primarily in general, it's about retention testing. What is the process with live games that are having updates personally and new things added to the game? What's process of live games? Well, you tend to like plan your live games in seasons, which have updates. Seasons have become more and more popular and prevalent in live service games, where you really want to make it a big event too. Like it's like, oh, next season is Season of the Witch, and you have like a new boss and a couple new mechanics and this new setting with new textures and sounds and a whole new part of the world you go to, like for instance. And then that way it's a big event that the marketing team can get behind and push for and build anticipation and get everyone to come back and pay attention and try the game again. And the reason you release these things is to re-engage people who have stopped playing the game for a while. You want to get them back in and get the numbers back up. So that's the process is basically like mostly informed by what are our numbers, how many people have stopped playing the game, how soon do we need to get these people back for our business to stay afloat and to keep the lights on, basically, because there's always bills to pay. So you might change the size of your update and the frequency of release based upon business reality. Because sometimes you're like, we need an update soon because people are not playing the game at all. We need to get them back. And sometimes you're like, oh, we have a pretty healthy stream of people still playing, so let's take our time and make this a really high quality. Like Blizzard's really good at focusing on quality. For instance, they don't rush things. They take a long time to make things good, which is why they're Blizzard and people trust them to make good product. But every company, that's generally true. There's nuance with each company how they approach live service planning. Let's see, opinions on Brawl Stars. Let's see, what can I say? Mostly not going to talk about Supercell stuff today, but I when I joined the company last year, I can say this: I like seeing that Supercell is moving away from the same look in the same exact kind of genres that I've been working in. There's reasons why I love the story of Brawl Stars internally. The fellow named Frank, who runs Brawl Stars, they were going to cancel Brawl Stars. and he had been working on it, and he believed he knew how to turn it around, and they gave him a chance, and he did. And this is like 2 something years ago, and that's when the one person's passion and belief in something can be so intoxicating that people get on board. And in this case, it really worked. Last year, we made removed loot boxes for ethical reasons, because we think it's healthier for the players. But it turns out people love loot boxes, so it was kind of all over the place with the fan reaction. There was some unexpected reactions, but um, we got through it. And Brawl Stars has a lot of loyalty, fan loyalty, and the players really care. And sometimes the care manifests as love, sometimes it manifests as like annoyance, but I love that the team cares and listens to all of it, no matter how painful it can be. So I love the team. I love the game for what it is, and I definitely love the players who play that game. How do you go about designing gameplay mechanics that are fun and unique? Um, well, first of all, the mechanics would have to be authentic or make sense to the premise. For instance, so you imagine if this is a game about flying through the clouds, flying is probably a verb. So whatever your fantasy is going to come with some fairly intuitive verbs. So if it was a game about flying through the clouds and I said eating, like eating is a verb, and maybe eating can belong in a game about flying. That's not the first verb I would think of with a game about flying through the clouds. Flying might be the first verb. So I make a verbs and nouns charts, and the game is built out of verbs and nouns. The verbs you get as the player: you can fly, you can eat, you can hit, you can smash. I'll give you a bunch of verbs, and then each one of those verbs interacts with a noun. What are you flying? A jetpack. What are you eating? Food. What are you smashing? The enemy. And so that's how you start laying out how you're going to make the game. So that's the process. How do you make them fun? You keep working. It's just gonna suck the first day and be no fun at all for a long time. You have to keep iterating and testing with other people until you get it feeling good. And that is a very subjective space to go into. It's hard to measure. Who is your biggest rival? Personally, Joey Franco, senior year of high school. No, it's kidding. That's not a real person. Our Supercell's biggest rival. Uh, from a business standpoint, anybody who, like, we moved out of the top 10 mobile game companies this year for the first time in 12 years, and we're just like, whoa, like we got to step things up. So anybody that's in that top 10 that now we are not in, that's ahead of us, is technically a rival, but that's not really what motivates us. We don't look at other companies and be like, them. um we're envious of the fact that they're reaching more customers and making more customers happy than we are, more successfully. But that's more of a reflection on us and how we can get better. So we don't spend much time saying, oh man, King, with your Candy Crush. And there's definitely no contentiousness there. It's just kind of like, nice job. That game is awesome. We should probably do better to appeal to more customers. When you're entertainer and work in the entertainment field, part of you is this like insecure little puppy that wants to make people happy and have them love you. And so you want to make people happy. And so the fact that we're not top 10 just means that we're not making people as many people as happy each day as these other companies are. And we just want to do better. So our top contender is anybody who's making more people happy per day than we are. But we also love those companies too and play their games, so it's not a contentious kind of thing. Let's see. What game do you think is best story wise? Oh my. uh there's so many. uh Telltale Games made a lot of story-based games which were really good. I'm a big fan and a friend of Tim Schafer from Double Fine. um I don't know. I think Last of Us might be one of the most emotional responses I've had to a game when I first played it, when the first one came out. And the TV show, I think, is really a testament to the strong foundations in storytelling. A good story is a one where it's not just a sequence of events, like this happened, then that happened, then that happened. A good story is how those events change people, what happens to people who are going through those events, good or bad, the hero's journey, as it were. And I think Last of Us probably is my favorite story and one of my favorite TV shows, and that's not an accident. Those two things are not coincidental. There's a reason. Let's see. What is the average salary for making games? Maybe it's the last part of that. That also depends on each where you come in on each one of those, like technology, business, or creative. Technology, well, if you come as an engineer, guaranteed you'll have a higher starting salary than somebody coming in as an artist or as a creative. Um, Business is the highest pay rate because you're in charge for a lot and you're accountable for everything. If it fails, it's mostly on you, and so it's fair that you get more money. Um, then that changes. So you might come in as, like like an intro level tools engineer that basically gets all the work nobody else wants to do. You're still making more than the entry level designer or artist who has to prove themselves. They have to prove they have taste, but you don't need taste ultimately to do your job. You just need to know how to code. It's much more objective. Uh, then from there, if you become a lead or a director, because you're more accountable and because you're responsible for more people and for the product, your pay goes up in a way that's fair in general to the level of responsibility you have and the amount of stress you have to live with every day. Sometimes you wake up in the middle of the night and you can't sleep because there's so many problems to solve and you don't even know where to start. And it's very stressful. And so you're getting paid more to carry more stress. That's basically the equation if I had to sum it up. And so to give you numbers though, which is what you really want, I'm not going to tell you what I make or what Supercell pays. I will say in general terms, and it depends by region, but for the Seattle area, a director can make, let's say, anywhere from $200,000 to $500,000 a year. Entry level engineer in Seattle will make anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 a year out of college. An entry level artist will make anywhere from $40,000 to $70,000. So it shifts up and down. If you're an MBA, if you have an MBA and you come in as in business side, you're well over $100,000, maybe 120. Those are general values for Seattle. There's so many factors into how much you get paid depending on what you do and where you live. But yeah, those are generally true numbers. These numbers are publicly available too. I invite all of you to go ahead and Google for like price, like salary ranges. In California, legally, you have to post a salary range for a job now. So if you look at companies in California, games industry companies, you should be able to go to their jobs page, and I believe they're legally obligated to post the salary range. And I'll give you a more accurate sense than me just kind of like firing off numbers from my head. How are we doing on time, by the way? It is 11. I want to check to see if we're okay.
You're good. I did have it scheduled till 11:15.
Very good.
So yeah,
I'll keep
you
going.
got.
I'll trust you, Jessica, to stop me because I can just keep going forever. Let's see. The game average salary. What does a day in your life look like? Oh, Karen, wonderful question. Uh, this week was unusual but fun. I had, my team's fully remote. We're one of two fully remote teams at Supercell. Most teams at Supercell all work together in the Helsinki office in Finland, which I go to a couple times a year. But mostly my team is work from home. And this week, I'll tell you what the average day looks like normally, but this week was fun because we had some of our folks, like half of our team is in San Francisco, half is in Seattle. The San Francisco team flew up and we all get together and have like an on-site, like IRL get together. But normally, what my day looks like is about 9 o'clock. Well, actually, about 6 o'clock in the morning. I'll start planning the day, and we have a mechanic on my team. It's called the stand up normally, but we just send out a note saying today, dot, dot, dot. We all say what we plan on working on. So we're all aware, even just amongst the five of us, what everyone's doing that day. Sometimes someone will be like, oh, I'm working on this. And you're like, wait, why are you working on that? We said we're going to do the other thing. Sometimes that happens. That's mostly for awareness and accountability, saying out loud what you want to do. And also just like stay organized. Sometimes I forget what I wanted to do. So it's good to take a minute. So we start some planning for the morning. Then we have a morning get together. We all meet up on Zoom for half an hour to an hour to talk about any topics that people need to talk about. And it's pretty on point. We don't spend too much time kind of going off in the weeds. Then the rest of the day for me right now is I'm still learning Unreal because we switched to Unreal from Unity on our project a couple months ago. I've never really worked in Unreal, so just picking up Blueprint, but also getting into C++, doing some design and engineering at the same time. When you're prototyping, everyone's kind of a designer. There's not like the designer. I'm the most experienced designer on the team, so people check with me on stuff. But pretty much just making the prototype. and then lots of coffee. Because I live in Seattle, we have to have a lot of coffee. So it's good to go away from your computer too. But that's my day in a nutshell. And by the end of the day, I tend to ping people and we share with each other what we've been working on in Slack. Like, hey, look what I made! The new mechanics in. Everyone should try it out. And then on Fridays, we play test our prototype as a team and look what we did that week and take stock and talk about what we want to do for the next week. That's what our iterative process looks like as a 5-person prototyping team. It's much different on Clash of Clans back in Finland right now, where the team is growing and they're working on making the game better at a scale that dwarves our efforts. So for me, I'm enjoying the prototype life right now, just like pretty basic. Let's just get all the verbs and the mechanics of the game stood up and then start testing them. Are Supercell games ever going to PC or console? As Ilka, my boss, the CEO of Supercell, stated in his yearly blog post this year, Supercell wants to reach gamers and entertain gamers everywhere they want to play. That implies we are going to seek to move beyond mobile in the future. That is not to say that Clash of Clans or Heyday are going to be ported to those other devices, but new games like the one I'm working on will strive to entertain people wherever they want to play. Like if I could somehow give you a gamepad at like a ATM machine so you can play a little bit of game while you're waiting for your money, I would. Like I don't care what console or platform it's on. If I could have you play games on the kitchen counter, I would help you play games on the kitchen counter. So yeah, we Supercell very much wants to move on to other platforms as well. But to be clear, mobile is the largest game platform in the world. But think about it, there's 4 billion plus phones out there, which means 4 billion plus people a day could be gamers that day. That's insane. There's only like 7 something billion people on the planet. So most of the planet are gamers now, which is kind of cool. Whether they identify with that term or not, that's up to them. But yeah, I'd say yes in general, but no specifics yet to be announced. What is the most rewarding part of making games for you? Seeing a bunch of people with different versions all the time of whatever we're talking about. Because I can say the word penguin and 5 people picture 5 different things. Getting even 5 people, much less 1,000 people like at Bungie, to come together with a common vision and make something real happen and have it succeed at market and have people love it. When that happens, when you have a play test and it goes really well, it's so validating. It's also humbling because sometimes you think something's gonna be fun and people just hate it. So you have to eat some humble pie too. But when I'm with a mature team that listens to people when they play the game and they just want to go back and make the game better, and then we do, that's the most rewarding thing ever. The smile is not just in our faces, but on the faces of people playing the game. That's what it's all about. Because life's very hard, as you probably all know, in the ways that it's hard for you, for each one of us. And if you can just lighten the load for anybody with a video game for just 5 minutes, that's awesome. That makes it and get paid for it too, which is nice because I have to feed my family. That's probably my favorite part, most rewarding part. What do you find the most rewarding and most challenging about your job? Well, I just mentioned the most rewarding, and the most challenging is getting 5 people aligned. I mean, just it's hard to get 5 people to agree on where to go to lunch, much less what grand creative vision you all share about a game you're going to make. Any of you who've been in a band or aren't even a garage band coming up with a song, you'll know how hard it is sometimes to get even 2 to 3 people to agree on a creative vision. It's purely subjective space. There's no truths. There's just opinions and ego, and stripping away ego helps you all see a common vision better. So it's hard. As people, we're wonderful. We're all kind of squishy. Sometimes we have bad days. Us people sometimes is the hard part of making magic happen, but earning each other's trust, once you do that, more things become possible in games and just in life. So that's the most challenging part, is listening to people over the sound of the awesome idea that you love so much that you came up with, to actually hear people actively and be present for them. That can be a challenge sometimes just because we're human. And then to do that at scale with hundreds of people on a team, oh my, that is very hard. Communication is hard. It takes a lot of work. It doesn't just happen. Don't assume it just happens. Let's see. Karen asks, but oh wait, nope, I just got to that one. Sean, do you only work from home? Ah, uh, well, I flew 70,000 miles last year. It was away from my house for 4 whole months. So I'd say that for work. So I'd say that I definitely don't just work from home. Given last year, I'm hoping to do more work from home this year because I don't like flying. But no, I was in Finland twice last year for like 2 weeks. I was away from home for 30 days straight. I had to go to Dallas and Finland, so I actually spent a lot of time. And I have an office in San Francisco, downtown as well, where some of my team is. So I'd say like I'm hoping this year I will be able to work from home uh, at least half of the year. The other half, I might have to be making trips around to San Francisco and Helsinki, and then there's probably a trip to Rome at one point for that's work related. Hopefully, not too much though. I'm really tired of flying. Although business class is nice, but I mostly work from home, and hopefully more this year. I don't mean to complain. It's all fun and really good. But for those of you who have flown, it's also a little stressful, being away from home. It's exciting, but also it gets stressful over time. What is the funniest bug you found in a game? Oh, Jennifer, that is a super super fun question. The funniest bug. It was actually on one of my little indie projects. There was a bug where all the heads of the characters ballooned up to like 20 times their intended size. And when I pressed play, I laughed for about 5 minutes because they're all just like these big balloon heads with these eyes. And it was a perfect timing too, because it was a very stressful day. And I laughed so long. That's the one that sticks out. It's silly. It's really silly. I worked on the Simpsons. The second best one is I worked on the Simpsons game at Electronic Arts, and the Bart from the Simpsons. There used to be a character he had called Bartman in the '90s, back in the '90s on that show, and his power in the game is he could ride updrafts with his cape and sort of fly and hover. And I had built an updraft under a ledge, and Bart would get stuck there and start vibrating faster, faster. And then because of the way physics engines work, he was building up a tremendous amount of power. And then when he finally slipped out, he would just shoot millions of miles into space. And we'd be like, where'd Bart go? It took a while to debug. It's like, oh, he's like a million miles that way. So that had the whole team wondering and scratching their head for a while. And it ended up being pretty funny. What are the working conditions like? Hours, pace, stress, environment, travel, work-life balance? Karen, wonderful questions. I just spoke a little bit to that, or hinted at it with travel. It varies based upon role. I'm game lead, so I have to travel more than anybody else in the team. Um, Conditions have gotten better in the industry in general, but work-life balance has classically been one of the worst things about making games. There's lots of news, lots of press, and it's absolutely true that some companies have forced their workers to work long hours, and they used to make them work weekends as well. And a person on the team, like executive producer, would be like, I just randomly came up with an idea while getting coffee, and now I'm going to have you all work this weekend to make it. And that's used to be how it worked. Electronic Arts was sued by, it was called the EA spouse lawsuit. The wife of one of the folks who worked on a team that never saw her husband because EA was making him work for a year on weekends, sued Electronic Arts, and she won. And now Electronic Arts cannot make people work past a certain amount. They have people's job now is to protect the balance between work. So when some creative person's like, I'm a genius and I have this idea and I demand you all make it forever for me and never go home, they can't do that anymore. This person now is installed to be like, yeah, you get them for the weekdays and that's it. So this is how many hours you get of these people's time. Use it wisely. You can't just have whatever you want. So that has happened. But the really dirty secret the game industry is people like myself are so passionate, so curious, so eager to make people smile. That passion burns us alive from the inside. We will work 48 hours straight because we're passionate. And it's the duty of managers at a company like myself to make sure people aren't doing that to themselves. That's the dirty secret. It's hard to do because, hey, we want you to be passionate to a limit. Please leave your computer and go outside, ride a bike, enjoy the sun, go kiss your family and hang out with your friends and have a good time. Step away from the computer. Because I'll tell you this, y'all, the dirty secret with productivity that no one talks about is you need to step away from your work to be more productive when you are working. If you sit in front of this computer as I have for 36 hours straight, you're not doing good work. You start making mistakes that cost other people time. You need to not work for a while to come back to do better work. Your brain can't go forever. It has a steep decline over the hours of the day. So I would say that that is true. For work-life balance, keep that in mind. It can be very stressful though. What is the gender ratio in game industry at Supercell? Supercell, I will say absolutely. And I showed you, I've been at a bunch of companies. Supercell has the healthiest amount of diversity that I've seen across its Helsinki, Shanghai, Korean, and now North American studios. Probably the most female leadership that I've seen in a video game company. And yeah, so diversity on the gender lines, awesome. Diversity on cultural background, awesome. Because while it is a Finnish company and Finnish culture is everywhere in the HQ, it's literally in Helsinki. And by the way, I love Finnish culture. I won't tell you much about it, but you should look it up. They're the happiest people on earth, voted 5 years in a row for a reason. They don't accept the happy thing, but they are very content because they understand how to live well. But even though it's founded in Finland by Finnish folks, it is very diverse. The backgrounds, how people self-identify, and I think the games will show even more and more of that as they come out over the years. And I'm excited by that a lot. I'm very proud to be at Supercell because of this. We really have to open the doors to more people so more types of games can be made. In the industry, not so great. I've always thought of the game industry as Neverland from Peter Pan. It's a bunch of boys who don't want to grow up misbehaving. I'm not proud to have been part of any of that or around it. I've always found it kind of annoying. Male behavior, especially in the early 20s in the game industry, is kind of pretty suspect. And that's luckily it's come to light. I think it's a good thing that there's some lawsuits and a lot of scrutiny happening, and everyone's looking at the game industry and saying, yeah, your games might be great, but I don't like how you treat people to make these games. But that is improving in general, but specifically I couldn't be more proud of Supercell and more humbled to be part of it, because I think it excels at this one very thing in particular. With mobile games that are live, what is the idea and purpose between in-game purchase, for example, purchasing diamonds and coins in Hay Day? What is the idea and purpose between in-game purchases and coins?
Sorry, I meant behind.
What's that now?
I meant behind, not instead of between. So.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
What is the idea behind? So what is the purpose behind having in-game purchases? Well, there's two ways to make money in live service games that are ongoing games. This you probably already know. I'll start there. You can make money with ads by showing you ads, and make money. And this is in the free-to-play business model, which is where 70-80% of all revenue in the games industry comes from. Is free to play. It's ads or in-game purchases. In some companies, a lot of mobile companies actually have given you the opportunity to spend money to not see ads, which I find a little scandalous. But the idea is basically just flatly that is where and how we keep the lights on. That's where our revenue comes from, is converting people by offering them value that they relate to, so they can spend some money to enjoy the game more, or be better at the game, or play the game longer. So that's the business strategy behind, or why there's things you can buy in a game. Does that answer your question, Jessica? Yeah, it's just a business model. That's how the lights stay on. Versus like on a console game, like I've worked on games where it's $60 to buy the game, and that's the last you spend, and you just own the game. Live service games are more like they can be subscription based, or ad revenue, or in-game purchases, or a combination of the three. And you got to be really careful too. You can be very abusive with that. I'll say this: if you are successful at game design or game development, you're successful in live service because you've made a game that's compelling. Compelling means people can gain a compulsion to play your game. It's a very slippery slope, a fine line between making a game that people can't stop playing and remembering not to abuse that. Like, it's like making the most delicious hamburger ever. Imagine McDonald's, unlikely, made a hamburger that you can't stop eating, or maybe their French fries are good examples. Like, you can't stop eating it. What's the social responsibility of McDonald's there? Should they start charging $100 per burger because they can, because they know they made something you can't stop eating? With games, it's the same way. I want you to feel compulsion to play because you can't stop because all this dopamine is being released. Oh, I feel so good when I win this game. But there's a healthy limit to that. I will salute King, who makes Candy Crush, because one of the ways they maintain and protect healthy relationships with players is they only give you so many turns at a time. They make you pay to keep playing because they want you to stop playing because they know if you keep playing because you have a compulsion to do so, you'll burn out. You'll burn yourself out. You'll burn out the relationship. It's like too much too fast. So once you do find a compulsive, you make a compulsive game, there's a lot of ethical responsibility there. Some of us think, especially at Supercell, to be like, I'm glad you find my game addictive. Now let's make sure this doesn't get out of hand for you, or else we'll lose your trust ultimately, and then we'll lose your business ultimately, and that's not good for anybody. So it's a slippery slope, making something that's addictive that you don't want people to get addicted to in an unhealthy way. Mobile games that are live. Blah, 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 blah. Oh, I just asked that. I just read that. Jennifer, if there's a game with licenses with other companies, can a game publisher keep renewing those licenses, or is there a limit to the license renewals? Wow, specifically awesome question. I've worked on licensed games. I will say that if everyone's making money, it's very probable the license will continue to be extended. If money is not made, then the licensor very much wants to get out of the deal. A concrete example of this is I was working in Electronic Arts in the mobile division, 2012, 2014, and I was asked to be creative director on the Despicable Me 3 game that's coming out because Illumination Studios in LA, who creates Despicable Me, they own that license. They were very upset with the previous two studios at EA that tried to make games based upon the Despicable Me and Minions license. And EA was very worried that they're going to pull out of the licensing deal because those games were underperforming. So yes, the licensing and licensor relationship is delicate if there's no money being made, if it's not going well. It's like any relationship. But yes, you absolutely can extend it. Another example, Electronic Arts, who has so many licensed games, has maintained a license with the NFL with Madden through Madden football for decades because it is the most important. And there's been times where the NFL's like, I don't know if we want to keep doing this, and EA has to pay a little bit more. So yeah, there's always a tense negotiation with people with very nice looking clothes in a room somewhere every year. But hey, at the end of the day, like I said, if everyone's getting paid, making money, why break it? But the licenses are pulled all the time because they're not doing well. That happens a lot too. Sean asks, who or what inspires you to keep innovating? The simple answer is looking at other games in the industry. That every year there's a game or two that comes out, and that curious part of me is like, how do they do that? What tech are they using? What is that? And that causes me to go learn about that tech and start thinking about how I can use that tech. The new tech is AI. One of the coolest applications for AI now is and I mean by AI I mean sorry, like chat GPT-esque language model based AI. It's starting to get used to create believable characters that keep saying different stuff. When you're designing characters in games, the worst part about it is you can tell they're not real after a while because they keep saying the same 5 things. It's like, hey, how you doing today? I'm doing fine. Here's an apple. Next day, how you doing today? I'm doing fine. Here's an apple. And you're like, you're fake. I can tell you're fake. It just breaks down the illusion. If that character can learn and grow and have different opinions every day forever because of AI, the new types of AI, that's amazing. So I've seen that happening now. And I'm like, finally, characters that seem alive because they don't just say the same wave file over and over and over again. That's amazing. Also, insert text to speech there. That technology is developing as well. So I get inspired by application of new tech. But I also get inspired by purely creative things too, like a painting one of our artists would make, or so anybody on online will make a painting of a scene or something. I'm like, whoa, I never thought of combining those two things like that. So that's what inspires me. Music also inspires me personally, the feeling you can get from music. Will Brawl Stars ever bring boxes back? Jennifer, I invite you to get your hands on. If you can't get to GDC, probably not. It's not easy to get down there. If you can get access to the GDC vault after GDC, or hopefully someone posted on YouTube, my friend, the two Franks, there's two Franks that run Brawl Stars. The project manager, then my friend Frank is a designer, old Blizzard designer who works at Brawl Stars now. They're going to be giving a talk at GDC about what happened and what it was like, the whole journey of removing loot boxes and what's next. I can't say either way. I actually don't know, to tell you the truth, but even if I did, I'm not supposed to say. But there may be some inkling about what's ahead for Brawl Stars. I'm sure there's going to be with when the Franks give a presentation at GDC. After that, it'll be public knowledge. You should be able to read the forums, at least read the reactions on Reddit to the presentation at GDC. But so stay tuned, I'd say. By mid to late March, there should be more information about that. Lastly, how does collaboration between companies happen? Well, I sorry to disappoint with a soft answer, but it really does. It depends on what they're collaborating on. Um, uh, so, for instance, one version of collaboration was on that console game Dante's Inferno that I worked on. We had a port to to the Sony handheld. It was called the PSP, and a separate company that specializes in taking people's games and porting them onto other devices. We worked with them, and that collaboration was pretty straightforward. I had to write a bunch of design docs, answer their questions when they were confused about why or how we did something, and then there's other collaborations that are outsourcing while you're making the game. So like uh, at some point, if we're successful with our game and we go live with it, we might have a company make characters for us or make art for us, and that's a form of collaboration as well. So they call it co-dev. Co-development with external studios is more and more reality because the cost of making games grows astronomically every year, and the customers don't care how much it costs; they just want more content. And so game companies are trying to get really creative by going to companies in like studios in Brazil or studios in Southeastern Asia to find co-devs to help make the game so that you can still keep the lights on, have enough profit, but create the amount of content that the consumers, the players can't get enough of. So there's all kinds of collaboration, really, but I'd say the last one is probably the most common these days with live service games. How it happens is, we're gonna need a whole bunch of art by next fall, and so we go out and we get bids from companies that can provide that service for us. It's a service basically, just like going to an electric company or going to an auto mechanic. It's like, you guys can do this thing, we need this thing, how much you charge? Okay, sounds good, we'll sign a contract. It'll usually be for some amount of time or some amount of content. How do you feel about it? Triple A games price increase to $70. Um, as a consumer, I don't like it. I am all about live service games now myself as a consumer. Um, but I will say that's tied to what I was just saying. Like players, customers, they don't care how much it costs to make these games. They keep playing games that set a higher and higher bar on quality and amount of content. So quantity and quality are growing exponentially because game companies are competing with each other to make more awesome looking stuff. And customers, it's not your fault. You're playing games like, well, the last game looked awesome. It had a ton of content. So why doesn't this one have one? I'm not interested. So the appetite goes up and up and up and up. And in some ways, game companies are doing it to themselves by setting that bar unrealistically and unsustainably high. And this is why large companies swallow up small companies, and EA and Activision grow larger and larger and larger. And then Tencent buy so many companies because fewer and fewer companies can afford to keep making the games you love. But even those large companies have to charge you more now because you're expecting more games with more content, with better looking content. It's a race to an unsustainable place. So I'm hoping that more people start playing indie games and develop a taste for it, because it'll release a lot of stress and pressure on human beings trying to keep up with demand. But it's a big deal. AI is going to help a lot. Automation is going to help a lot, not by replacing jobs, by helping people do their jobs faster with less stress on them. So people need AI actually to get a better work life balance. That's my opinion. That's not Supercell's opinion. We don't use AI. It's all human, all handmade.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Steve. Thank you, students who are still on. I know Banks had to leave, and